What names of people you've met made you wonder what their parents were thinking? Boss's friend named their kid Monster Galileo, followed by their last name. The nurse tried to talk them out of it. They called in child services to talk them out of it. The people insisted. Kid goes by Galileo. Honestly, I kind of like the sound of it for an adult or a performer's name, but being a kid named Monster has to be rough in school. I feel like you'd be cool as heck in elementary school if you were named Monster. Middle school would be rough, but hopefully by that time you're coasting on the popularity from elementary and just carry the awesomeness forward. It really depends on your personality. If you end up being a shy kid or do anything embarrassing, that name would be brutal to have. If you're popular or edgy, then it's an awesome name. My boyfriend's grandmother wanted to name her daughter Sunshine. The midwife said that wasn't allowed because it wasn't a real name, and his grandmother had no other baby backup names. So a few minutes later, when she heard someone down the hall screaming, "Tina," she named her daughter Tina because she couldn't think of anything else on the spot. I once met a dude named Lovey. It was a family name. I think it was especially cute because he was such a big, tough guy. There's a male New Zealand weightlifter named Precious. My boyfriend was nearly called Egbert, but predominantly Egg for short. I'm glad they decided against it. I knew a guy named Engbert. I don't know why his parents would call him that because Eng means scary in our language. He was kind of a bully though, so I guess it fits. I worked at a registrar for a while, and among the birth certificates I got, some of the standouts I saw were Killer, Syphilis, and Sweet Prayer Sunrise. This last one was a boy. Any idea why someone would want to name their kid Syphilis? The father gave her both at the same time? The parents probably heard it somewhere, didn't know what it meant, but liked the ring of it. My dad knew a girl in school named Bimbo. Bimbo brand bread is one of, if not the largest manufacturer of bread products on the planet. Except it never really took off in America because we don't pronounce Bimbo like the Mexican manufacturer does. They pronounce it Bimbo, not Bimbo. As much as that might explain where the word came from, I can't imagine that being named after a brand of bread would have been much more preferable to the girl. I guess at least the pronunciation might throw people off. Before I was born, my dad wanted to name me Sky, but he thought that replacing the Y with an I would be cute. Thank goodness my mum isn't stupid, or I might have been named Ski. I knew a woman who named her daughter Sunny with an I. White, new age sort of woman. I don't think she realized it, ever. Was that girl always fighting with her sister, Shia? My classmate's mother was a maternity nurse, and she has a couple who wanted to name their son Colin, but wanted to give him a unique spelling for it. I don't understand why parents do this. It doesn't make a boring name more interesting at all. All it does is set your child up for lifelong inconvenience. They spelled it out for her to put on the birth certificate. C-O-L-O-N. They tried to name their son Colon, as in the organ attached to your butt. When my classmate's mother explained this to them, they were painfully embarrassed and asked her to write it down with the normal spelling instead. I don't think they'll ever live it down. I went to school with a colon as well. It was not great for him. Could you pass the salt? You know, eventually. Conversely, I went to high school with a kid named Colin, and our physics teacher constantly pronounced it colon. Like, how many times does he have to correct you, lady? In France, there used to be a list of names that you had to choose from, mostly based on that day's name, saint, and 3 to 4 others, which is why there were so many Jean, Marc, Louise, Philippes, Marys, Annes, Valeries, etc. in France. Now it's free choice, but anyone can ask a judge to cancel a name choice and force the parents to suggest one the judge finds acceptable. So no names like Coca-Cola, Xerox, substance names, butthole, Nutella, fruit, devil, blue, murder, plus the rejected name gets added to a banned list to streamline the rejection in the future. In Denmark, we still have an approved list of names. You can apply for a name to be added, but other than that, you choose from the very long list. Portugal also has a list of names. It's included multiple spellings of the same name. Eric, Eric, and Eric with a K are all allowed, though Eric's not really a Portuguese name. And names that aren't just from the Portuguese language. I think they are there so that children of third-generation immigrants can have names from their cultures. However, if at least one of the parents isn't Portuguese, you're allowed to name your child anything that's not offensive. My brother talked my mother out of naming me Mulan because he had a major crush on her and didn't think a sack of potatoes like me deserved to be given her name. I tried to tell someone not to name their kid Tarmac. They learned the word from NASCAR. They could have just named him Jimmy, Jeff, or Dale. Not a nurse, but as a med student, a patient wanted to name her child Mudpiles. The nurses silently protested and waited a few days. Mum changed her mind. Mudpiles, I love it. God, what kind of a kid Mudpiles might have been? The S at the end really makes it. I wish the mom hadn't changed her mind. I would support baby Mudpiles all the way. I mean, maybe the mom was also a med student, just considering that Mudpiles is a pretty common acronym that med students find helpful. My ex-husband didn't think it was fair that girls could be named Grace or Hope, etc., and seriously suggested Pestilence, War, or Plague for a boy. His choice for a girl was Tangerine. Fortunately, we never had any children. I'm a Grace, still waiting to meet the pestilence of my dreams. The thought of meeting someone and then being like, "This is my son Plague and my daughter Tangerine," is killing me, oh my god. Another story where I can bring up Discworld characters. Allow me to introduce Hope, Charity, Chastity, and Prudence Carter, and their brothers Animal Lover, Anger, Deviousness, Covetousness, Jealousy, and Catastrophe. You can't just leave them hanging with that small reference. The Carter parents were a quiet and respectable Lancre family who got into a bit of a mix-up when it came to naming their children. First, they had 4 daughters who were christened Hope, Chastity, Prudence, and Charity, because naming girls after virtues is an ancient and unremarkable tradition. Then their first son was born, and out of some misplaced idea about how this naming business was done, he was called Anger Carter, followed later by Jealousy Carter, Animal Lover Carter, and Covetousness Carter. Chastity was enjoying life as a lady of negotiable affection in Ankh-Morpork, Prudence had 13 children, and Charity expected to get a dollar's change out of 75 pence, whereas the boys had grown into amiable, well-tempered men, and Bestiality Carter was, for example, very kind to animals. My uncle wanted to name his daughter Raider God. I'm glad they settled on Jada. I work in a music store that offers lessons and rents instruments. We have a list of the oddest child names. January, Quest with a W, Sixte, Shebra, Battle, and Shy Ann are just a few on there. The best one was IDOWorkHereLady. When speaking with the grandmother, she said that the mum wanted to name her Olivia, but the father hated the name. The dad saw a bottle of Aleve on the counter, so he and the mother compromised and came up with IDOWorkHereLady. Haha, Shebra, followed by her brother, Hebra. Hijockstrap? As much as I want to meet someone called Hijockstrap, I imagine that Shebra may have a different culture behind its origin than the others. My dad loves Stevie Nicks and wanted to name all of us Rhiannon, but my mum wouldn't let him. So my oldest sister's name ended up being Stevie Nicole, but now some people always assume she's a guy when they see the name Stevie. Rhiannon is a popular name in Wales. It wouldn't seem unusual here. My sister's name is Rhiannon, but my mom was always scared people would call her Rhea for short, so she only called my sister by her middle name. Kind of funny to type that out. She loved Fleetwood Mac but was too worried to fully commit to the name Rhiannon. I once had a student named Linoleum. Some midwife really dropped the ball on that one. My brother wanted to name our soon-to-be younger brother Corn Peas, and our parents almost went with it, because they felt bad about asking for his input and then rejecting it. Fortunately, they got over that and passed on the name. Cornelius Pearson Smith. Corn Peas for short. Cornelius grew up with a perpetually broken nose thanks to his name. And here my mum was talked out of naming me Violet. Sounds like an old lady, they said. Aw, but Violet is such a cool name. I know. Instead, I got one of the most common names of the 80s. When I went to college, I lived in a hallway where there were literally 6 of us. My roommate had the same first name as well. I do like my name because it sounds good with my last name, but I have only once met a Violet in 37 years, and she's my friend's niece. I'm a teacher. There are certain names that each teacher avoids because we've had a student, or 7 with that name, who were difficult in some way or another. One year, there were 4 Dylans in the same cohort, and they were all hell on wheels. One of the teachers at that grade level had a baby with his wife that spring, and she named the kid Dylan. The rest of us were like, "Didn't you vehemently veto that?" He just shrugged and said it was important to her, and he wasn't the superstitious type. Flash forward a few years and I saw a toddler tearing through the salad bar at the grocery store, spilling things, moving spoons from one container to another, reaching in it with his hands. It was Dylan. I haven't ever met a Brian, Brandon, or Braden that wasn't a terrible brat. My late, unlamented brother-in-law was Brian, pain in the butt to be very mild, substance addict, tried to kidnap my child twice, got married on my husband's birthday, etc. Brandon down the street would come into our yard and steal from my kids and harass my cats. I've always found that any boy named Angel was poorly behaved. This didn't extend to girls, though. Angela, Angelina, and Angelica, they were fine. Boys named Angel are always the worst behaved. Also, Anthony, Bodie, Kevin, Travis, Vincent, and Victor. My rule in general, anything with a V in it will probably be a pain in the neck. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I had a coworker named Trina. When she was pregnant, she told me that she and her husband had decided to name the baby Latrine. I had to explain to her that she was naming the poor baby after the hole in the ground that soldiers crap into. She was horrified and changed it to Katrina. 2 days after the kid was born, Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans. I hate to wonder what would have happened to New Orleans if she did name her Latrine. That would have been quite the crap storm. I have a false leg. My parents had to be talked out of calling me Peggy by the midwife. Oh, you probably could have taken them to court if they called you that. Oh, Peggy Sue. You could sue for a pretty penny, Peggy. My mother, who has an odd, to say the least, sense of humor, wanted to name the baby brother Ichabod Rusty. Our surname is Ford. She was determined to call him Itchy Rusty Ford. Tickled herself crapless through the pregnancy. And look, it was funny, I mean I was 12, but everyone thought she was just being her usual goofy self. Apparently she got attached to it and at some point Dad just said, "Frick no, we're not naming the baby that." They settled on something much more appropriate. Although these days I think the little crap might have been better named Itchy Rusty in my opinion. Similarly, our surname is something that can basically mean male member in my language. My dad wanted to name me Elwood if I was a boy. My mum was like, "Woody Wang? No way!" And my dad legitimately saw no issue with that. His second choice was to name me after his father, Harry. Good thing I'm a girl. Not a midwife, but lived with the student midwife when I was a student. The first set of twins she delivered got called Red and Blue. When I worked in a boring admin job dealing with applications from members of the public, I came across Jessica Rabbit. Saw her passport and everything. I just hope that she chose that later in life rather than her parents landing her with it. The worst ones I saw in that job were combinations made by women getting married and taking their husband's surnames, so can't really be blamed on the parents. I took my husband's surname so my initials would no longer be JCB, which is a tractor brand in the UK. My dad knew when naming me and thought it was hilarious. I'm getting married this year, so my initials will soon be MEH. Of all things in life, I can easily say I didn't see that coming. Hang in there, meh. My wife used to have the initials HOT, which she is, but now is HOR, which she's not so thrilled about. I was originally supposed to be Lex, like Lex Luthor. My dad talked my mum into naming me Alexander and my nickname be Lex, but they just called me Alex. I always assumed Lex Luthor's full name was Alexander. Oh, it is. I have a son named Alexander who goes by Lex. It's a perfect name for him, even though he's a very kind and compassionate kid. As a family medicine resident, I personally delivered 2 different girls named Khaleesi. This was around 2016, well before Season 8. I imagine there might be some buyer's remorse on the parents' part at this point. Yep. I've often wondered about the thousands of children who were called Daenerys or Khaleesi and how they reacted after the Mother of Dragons went full crazy murderer fascist. And I'm just going to say I fricking called it about how that was going to go down. Working as an ERT on overnights, I got called to an OB to help out a lot. One name will always stick with me because of how unfortunate it is for the kid and how ridiculous everything about it was. The mum was deep into crystal and other substance use and she told us she wanted him named Zion. We were like, oh cool, no problem, so we asked her to fill out the paperwork of everything for us to submit, and put in the chart and she wrote down Vazion. She looked us dead in the ears and said the V is silent. She also gave him 5 middle names because she didn't know which one was the father, so he got them all. Should have named that kid Pokemon. Kids caught all the middle names. I'm neither of these, but I had a classmate in university whose name was Mega Nathan. To date, I don't know why Nathan failed to suffice. When I first read that name, I thought it would be pronounced similar to Afghanistan, Meganathan. On second look, I'm now wondering whether it's actually pronounced Mega Nathan and struggling to decide which is worse. My dad wanted to name me Snövit, the Swedish name for Snow White, but in the end my parents named me something else. Had my younger brother been a girl, he had been named Tornrosa, meaning thorn rose, which is the Swedish name on Sleeping Beauty. Never did get to the bottom of what my dad's obsession with princesses was all about. My mom is a public school librarian, and the cringiest name she's encountered so far is a girl named Lesme, pronounced like Leslie but with an M. I also have an acquaintance with the last name Forrest, whose father was eventually talked out of naming her Rain. Back in 2000 to 2004, I worked in a hospital doing admin, and an old battle axe of a senior midwife stomped over with this angry-looking pregnant teenager in tow. "Varvara!" Old battle axe roared. "Varvara! Open up that internet-y thing on your computer." Old battle axe didn't know computers, but she was well scary, so I agreed, and opened up the internet-y thing. "Show this ridiculous child the first thing that appears when you type in the word Chanterelle." The angry, pregnant teenager whined about how it was a pretty name and loads of girls were naming their little girl it, and then she went stone-dead silent when she saw picture after picture of nasty sulfur-yellow mushrooms sprouting out of muddy forest floors. "Told you, it's a frickin' fungus!" Old battle axe roared and stamped off to be terrifying and sensible to other pregnant teenagers, leaving me with the angry one. Turned out that the name she'd actually been thinking of was Chardonnay, which is both the name of a very expensive wine and the name of a character in a UK soap opera called Footballers' Wives, which is about as classy as it sounds. The baby got that as a middle name later on, which was fine. The first name was Sophie or something along those lines. That's awesome. The midwife probably acted that way so she could stop future generations from being born with names like Old Battle Axe, although I bet with a name like that she got picked first in sports. All the senior midwives at my hospital had names like that. Old Battle Axe and Iron Lil were the two I remember most vividly. They'd been there since the place was built and were older than God and had absolutely no time for bullcrap. They kept the place impeccable, and everyone up to and including the head of the NHS were frightened of them. I once saw Iron Lil take down a drunk and bullying boyfriend with a flying rugby tackle outside of the water birthing room. It was great. I would like to hear more stories about Iron Lil and Old Battle Axe, please. That sounds incredible. I want to hear all of your stories about these ladies. What awesome lives. My dad legitimately told my mum that my sister was to be either Jackie Ann after his ex or Lisa Marie after Elvis's daughter. I'm amazed that I was conceived after that. My sister is Lisa. Haha. I wanted to name my daughter Daisy, as it's always been my favorite. Even my husband loved the idea. My whole family said it was a dog's name and they wouldn't let it go, so I didn't name her Daisy. And here I am Pupatai Arevu Danambi, Kalia Perumal. Oh, hello, fellow South Indian person. I was almost named Cinderelle. I have no idea what my dad was smoking at the time. My coworker went to school with a girl named Fallopia. I feel sorry for her, especially when she takes biology classes and they have to talk about fallopian tubes. I know a teacher who has an elementary-age student with an African name that unfortunately does not translate well into North American English. The kid's name is Akok Ring. And yes, I wish I was kidding. In my high school, there was a kid whose name sounded like the F word when pronounced in English. I kid you not, all of the teachers called him Lucky instead. I don't know the details because he was an upperclassman and I didn't know him personally. My mum wanted to name me Kirby, after her vacuum. Thankfully, my dad talked her out of it. I currently work with someone whose name is Immunique. I don't think any midwives or nurses were involved with the naming. I met a child called Immunique once. She was not the only one in her class of first graders named that. You could tell it already annoyed her as she had to spell it out to me and the other adults there. Well, color me surprised that there was more than one child with that name in a single educational institution. Does this come from a TV show or something? Is it the Khaleesi of the 1980s? My mom had to talk my dad out of wanting to name me Prudence. I wouldn't have minded being called Prudence, but that's just me. Now I have an even weirder name that nobody knows how to pronounce because of a popular TV show. I feel like going through high school being called Prude would have been rough though. At least they would have been able to pronounce my name correctly then. A senior guy I was friends with started calling me by an incorrect pronunciation of my first and last names as a joke. Now most of my band does it. It's funny but also confusing for people who don't know my actual name. When I got a solo in marching band, my name was announced over the speaker as that exact wrong pronunciation of my name. I just shared a look of annoyance with the drum major and accepted it as a fact of my life. Also, that senior came back after he graduated to help at band camp this year and educated the freshmen on my incorrect name that they were to call me. I was like, "Thanks, Michael, I really appreciate it." My mother's name. My grandmother wanted to name her Ishbel, and my grandfather wanted to name her Laura. So they got a baby name book, and the first name they agreed on would be her name. Her name is Wanda. My ex wanted to name my son Jagger, pronounced either Jagger or Jagger, or Schottenjagger. That was a no. Everyone talked me out of naming my daughter Evelyn, and nickname Evie. It's a family name, but apparently it's for older women only. My wife and I both loved the name Evelyn, and it would have been our daughter's name, but a close coworker had her daughter 2 weeks prior to us and named her Evelyn first. We felt awkward picking the same name, so we settled on our second choice. Also, I think Evie is a cute nickname. Again, not quite what was being asked, but a friend of mine was almost called Apollo. To be fair, he was born on the day of the first moon landing in 1969, and his dad is Greek. His mum put her foot down, though, and he ended up being Alexander, which is still a good Greek name. Okay, technically Macedonian, but the Greeks claim him too. I was young and stupid in the 80s when my daughter was born. I really wanted to name her Frisbee, because I was just certain that Frisbee last name was going to be the coolest girl in school. Nothing ever came of my bad idea. My daughter's name is Jennifer now. My dad is the third, and I would have been the fourth if I was born a dude. He still wanted to name me Roberta Edwina, his female version. Yikes. When I was in basic training back in the early 2000s, there was a guy whose last name was Starcruiser. I found out from one of his division mates that his full name was Mercury Sun Starcruiser, and that his dad apparently was a massive Star Wars geek after seeing the original way back in the 70s, and that he'd legally changed his last name to Starcruiser. This guy was not in my division, but was in one of the ones that was housed in the same building my division was in. So I'd seen him a few times. Turns out he was also married, and she was in a different division at the time as well. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.